Jo-An, thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. I know that you are a very busy woman, and I really appreciate the fact that you accepted to come on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
I don't remember if I had seen you since you became the director of PYO. I can't remember, so I know it's very late, but congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's better much later than never. So. uh, I love the fact that you accept to do this because initially, the podcast. I've had different people on the podcast, but essentially, it was thought of and designed to have people like you uh, on the episodes because the idea is to showcase people that work behind the scenes, whether it's in community organizations or whether it's in business or whatever field or industry they're in, and to highlight the fact that there's people that exist that do phenomenal work. People don't necessarily know them or see them, but they're there. They work hard, and they should be acknowledged. So this is exactly the reason why I did this podcast, and the fact that you're here. I'm really grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, Tell me a little bit about because we're gonna go through everything that you do, and that you're the director of an amazing organization that I happen to work with very closely um, uh, during the time that I was in politics, and
Okay.
that's where we met, obviously. Uh, so we both kind of served the residents of Parc-Extension at different capacities. How does this all fit in with you? I mean, are you from Parc-Ex?
No, I am not. I'm not even from Montreal.
What?
No, I grew up South Shore, North Shore. I guess most of my life was in Bellefeuille, which is near Saint Jerome.
Okay.
And when I was growing up there, I was the only English speaking family there.
That's funny.
So, no, but Park-Ex is my adopted home.
That's good. Okay.
So,
So how does this all come in the picture? Like, when do you come to Park-Ex? How does this whole thing start with PYO? Because obviously you didn't start as a director. I mean, when I
no.
got to know you, you were just working there, and you moved up, and good for you. But how does this all start?
It started when I actually decided to go to university. And so I went to Concordia. And PYO was actually just a part time job. It was a replacement of a maternity leave for a very short time. And I was going to be volunteer coordinator in what I thought was a very, very interesting corner of Montreal. I loved the ethnic diversity and the challenges that were there. So I think I worked in that part-time position a total of 2 months
Yeah.
before they like, okay, well, we have a job for you. So I actually worked both at PYO and at went to school, finished my
Okay.
schooling.
Yeah. It's funny how things happen sometimes. Like you don't realize how like a little job that you may think is insignificant can lead to something great. I remember it was the exact same thing how I started in politics. I wasn't supposed to stay on. I had just come back from Greece. I remember, and Jerry had just won his election, and I was supposed to just go in there and help him out. Just set everything up. And then my plans were to leave after that summer in 2007. And 11 years later, I was running as a candidate. you know,
That's awesome.
it's just funny how things work. Uh,
Yeah,
so when did you start? How long ago was this?
2002.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, so it's been 18 and some years. Oof, 18 years.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, Park-Ex, in 18 years.
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Uh, Tell me, okay, so let's just tell people about the PYO. Basically, it's the Parc-Extension Youth Organization. Of course, it's an old organization. I had previously Perry Calce, whom you know very
Okay,
well,
yeah, of course.
the chairman of your board. So we went, a little bit in detail about Parc-Ex and PYO, especially. But let's just remind people, what PYO is.
Okay, well, it was founded in 1967,
Yeah.
so it's much older than I am. Um, and it was a grassroots organization for sports. So it started like that. It was founded by Wally Ziobro and Mike Pagano, who are still involved in the organization today. And throughout the years, when Parc-X's residents' needs changed, well, our mission statement is very broad. It's just to better the life of the residents of Parc-Extension. So we developed different programs depending on what the needs were. So right now it does everything from food services to, we have an arts and leisure program that goes into the schools for children who have recently immigrated here. We have a drop-in center. We have a summer camp. My God, we have like a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's,
Obviously Park Extension, and it's still considered one of the poorest districts across Canada. Why do you think there was this need eventually to just get this sort of organization started? Was it primarily just to keep kids off the streets, or like what was the idea behind it?
I think that was it at the very beginning, was to get kids off the street and getting them to do something productive and learn teamwork and just find something else to do than just hanging around. So
Yeah.
hockey and baseball were huge in PYO back then. Like I remember hearing there's 1,000 kids that used to play hockey for PYO, and baseball was another sport. And sports is still very much part of PYO. We still do cricket and skating and hockey development. But now, instead of just doing sports for sports, we do sports for getting kids to speak French outside of school, and just get them to know good role models. And so sports and leisure is an excuse for other things.
Right.
But don't tell the kids that.
It's funny that you mentioned speaking French, because I can imagine, like, in the very beginning, obviously the language is spoken at home very different from what the language is today. But regardless, it's still it's still a district where, the primary language spoken at home is neither English nor French.
Exactly. And I get a lot of inspiration for having grown up in a place that was only French. And I remember my first day of school going into class, and the teacher was like, she said my name. So she was talking to me, and I have no clue what you're saying. So I definitely remember that, and doing homework and looking up everything in the dictionary, and then having to look up words that were in the dictionary to understand what's being said. But the most French that I learned wasn't in school. It was doing after school activities and just hanging out with friends.
Yeah.
So that's what's great about Parc-X, is that while there's a huge amount of languages, I think there's like 100 different languages and dialects that are spoken in Parc-X. Well, at least the kids can all communicate in French. And,
I remember a while back, where there was this announcement that we were making, and it's funny because the main premise, and it was in a school, it was a school program, and it was funny because we were looking at all these these different kids, and we knew that none of these kids speak French or English at home. We knew that,
Nope.
right? But it was amazing to see how quickly they adapted to this, reality. Because not a lot of the kids aren't immigrants now. I mean, they're born here, right? But still, the reality at home is different. It's like it was when I was growing up. I mean, it was just Greek at home, right? So, and it's just amazing to me that I was seeing all these different kids, and in the back of my mind, I knew that none of these kids speak French or English at home. Yet here they are, and they kind of all coexist, and it's pretty much the language that brings them all together.
Exactly. And with those language things that it's not spoken at home, often these kids are the translators when they speak for the school or when they come for services. So you have kids translating, and that has
essentially nothing has changed since the 80s. Basically, that's
no, exactly.
It's the exact same reality. No, it's amazing. And you also mentioned cricket, and this is something that we had no idea even existed when we were growing up in Parc-X, right? But I mean, it's funny how you've adapted to this new reality, because you have a large portion of the population living in Parc-X that are South Asians.
Yes. So we have a cricket league, and well, a little in-house cricket league. And what I think is great about it is that our coach is a woman. You don't often see cricket
Oh,
coaches being
yeah.
women. And every year we organize a little tournament that anybody who works at PEYO plays against the kids. We don't understand the game. The kids tell us to run. We run. We're running in the wrong direction. But anyway, it's a lot of fun.
But is this, because I remember growing up, and PYO was like a central place for kids, to either be involved in hockey or baseball or soccer. Um, but it was much larger than PYO. I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
part of a bigger network, and there were tournaments and provincial tournaments, and it was this huge deal. Is this the same thing with cricket? I mean, have you reached that stage yet, or is it just local for the moment?
We chose specifically not to become involved in the federations because there's two different federations, and they kind of fall on political lines,
Oh, okay.
and that's not something we want to get involved with. So we just do it house league.
Okay.
So
That's fun.
yeah.
Do you have kids? Do you have a lot of kids?
Yeah, we have about 60 kids that participate, anywhere from 6 to 17. And we have some adults too that sneak in there and want to play.
They can't just stay on the sidelines and just
No.
look.
We have a whole bunch of like sideline coaches too. So
Exactly. That's standard. So for you, when you came to Montreal to study,
yeah.
you obviously didn't know PYO. You just found a job, and what was your first impressions coming in? First of all, coming into Parc-Ex, because a lot of people don't even know where Parc-Ex is. I mean, we're it's a district that is so enclosed from all around.
Mhm.
Everyone kind of just drives by it because you have to, because it's in the middle of Montreal, but nobody really knows that it's Parc-Ex. How was that reality for you?
Um, it was a bit surreal.
Yeah.
Because you're walking down the street and you see Indian restaurants, you see Greek restaurants, and Mama Africa with the hair extensions and all that. And that's not something that you saw when you grew up north.
Yeah.
But I think that's also what attracted me to Parc-Ex, is that it's just so many different cultures, and or growing up in a very, very white francophone area. I think, yeah, that's what I needed as a change.
What about PYO? You walk into PYO the first day, like what's the impression? First of all, what was the job? What did you have to do back then?
It was just coordinating volunteers. So we had a huge basin of volunteers that would help out for all of our activities, and it was just connecting them to different needs and making sure that everything was okay when they went to volunteer and that they were taken care of. So
Mm.
it was a uh, very basic,
Yeah.
easy job for a part-time job. And my first impression, well, Leonard Buckles was the director back then. And uh, when I walked into the organization, the accountant and the assistant director and the director were playing football. They were throwing a football through the office.
Funny.
So like, it was just a very active and dynamic place to work.
Yeah. Uh, did you ever imagine that this was going to become what it is today, or for you it was just, look, I'm just going to go work, and then when I'm done, I'm done?
Um, that's a hard question. It was never just work and I'm done. I'm done. I moved to Montreal because of PYO to be able to
Okay.
be closer to work, because that was one hell of a commute. And while I didn't live in Parc-Ex, just because I just never found a place
Yeah.
that was available, I know Parc-Ex better than I do where I live now.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you one street over from where I live in Ville-Saint-Laurent, but I can tell you every lane in Parc-Ex, and Parc-Ex adopted me.
For sure. Uh, Tell me about how this happened. How did you, how did the position open up? Like, were you proposed? Did you step up to the plate? How did this all happen for you to get the lead role there?
Um, I think every time I was like preparing to say, okay, I'm going to leave PYO because I have a new, I have a calling to do something bigger and better. The director or the board would offer me, no, stay, and one day you will be director. So I think the board of directors had this knowledge that it's very important to invest in your human resources. They allowed me to go back to school to do a master's degree while studying, and all my work was done on the organization. So they would just tell me, stick in here and you're going to be one of the next directors. So it took a few years, but
there's a lot of things that have changed, obviously, since you got there. Like you said, I mean, it's kind of transformed from this sports and leisure organization to more, more of a social and community based mission.
Yes, exactly.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I think it really goes with just trying to develop the best programming for the residents. And back in the days, I think it was very easy to start a nonprofit organization and just run it off of an Excel spreadsheet and maybe like writing a grant or two. Right now, running an organization is like running a business. You have to develop relationships with grants, funders, and write grants, and budget everything. And so that's how I think it's changed back now. It's become very professional. We also have our own source of revenue, our kitchen service that we do. We have a community cafeteria, we have Meals on Wheels, but we also have a catering service. And developing that service was important because that means we can re-inject those profits into our youth programs.
Yeah.
So
tell me a little bit about the youth programs. When did that start? It's interesting to me when I speak with people that are involved with in organizations that are focused around youth engagement, and especially in Parc-Extension, because we know how fragile that whole environment is. It was in the past. I'm not sure if it's still the case today, but I find it interesting that when I meet individuals that want to focus so much attention on attracting the youth and engaging them. Were you there when this whole project started, or did it exist already?
One of the very first mandates I got was the summer camp. The summer camp existed when I started to work there, but because I ran a sleepover summer camp before working at PYO, and they wanted to just revamp that program, they asked me to stay on when I was like trying to sneak off and do something else, and to really take on that program. And that program is really what I see as one of the most basic programs in PYO, because it's where we try to create a milieu de vie, as we say in French, where kids grow up. So they start in summer camp, they're usually 5 or 6 years old. And that's pretty straightforward. We do sports, leisure activities, we do arts, we go out on outings. And so we go to La Ronde and the water slides, and that's great. But you can't run a summer camp with just your counselors. And we developed a program for our assistant counselors. So those are kids between 13 and 17. So they're not legally allowed to work yet. But we wanted to keep them engaged in something during the summer, and basically to come and learn the skills of being a counselor. So we give them little classes on how to take care of kids and first aid classes and things like that. And then because they do such a phenomenal job, and there's like about 60 of them per summer that come and participate in that program, we give them a budget. So guys, you guys have $5,000 and you guys decide what you want as a little thank you. So they basically choose what activities they'd like to do them amongst themselves. So there's a counselor that goes with them, and they choose that they want to go and do, I don't know, they've done everything from movie night to going to a all-you-can-eat buffet, to the water slides and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically stick around. They work until they're 16 years old, and then they get the first shot of becoming counselors. So this is my basin where I go hire my counselors first. I'll never hire somebody from outside if I can get somebody that's a Parc-Ex kid that grew up in the organization. And so they become our counselors, and then there's a few of them that are, even there's one right now, our coordinator grew up in summer camp. And I remember because I was the coordinator back then, and he drove me crazy. So he's coordinator this year, and the kids can drive him crazy.
That's right. Payback.
So, yeah, exactly.
Do you think, obviously you're doing a huge service to these kids because, the environment that they're growing up in is obviously very uncertain. What kind of impact do you think this whole experience has on their upbringing?
I think it gives them just a place where they can be themselves without any of um, any of the pressure that they might feel at home. Um, when you come from, I think, two different cultures, you have the pressure of being a Québécois or a Canadien on one side, and then the pressure from home of keeping your cultural identity.
Yeah.
And that can be very caring for certain kids. So we just give them a spot where they can be themselves. They develop their own, what they want and what they want to do. And we encourage them. Once they're older, they can go to our drop-in center, and we can help them either go back to school, find a job.
Do you think that, this whole focus and importance on creating this environment for youth engagement, has created kind of like this gateway for these kids to have a better life rather than, you know, taking the wrong turn? And, I mean, we all know kids in Park X that, didn't have the outcome that, probably
Mhm.
everyone hoped for them, right?
Exactly. I think so. And I can just tell you countless stories of people that have gone through our programs and now are business consultants or work for the government. And it's them. They come back and say, hey, you change. Well, not me personally, but
Yeah.
like the organization, it gave me a chance, like the self-worth that I needed to turn around and make the right choices and choose differently than some of my friends did, and to go on in bigger and better things.
I had met a bunch of them when I think it was in 2017 when you celebrated
Yeah, the 50th. Yeah.
the 50th, and there was a lot of people there. And we, I talked to a few of them, and a lot of them told me, like you said, I was a little kid, and another one said, I was in the hockey teams, another one, in the soccer teams, and it's funny how this organization has taken such a central place in this district. It's as if, I don't want to say everything revolves around PYO, but almost. I mean, you have branched out in every single aspect of the social life, whether it's in education, whether it's in leisure, whether it's in the summer camp programs, whether it's in the food baskets, which we're going to talk about also. You're so involved in everyone's daily lives that it's almost impossible to be in Park X and not know about PYO.
Um, Definitely. I think a lot of people receive services and might not even know that it's from PYO.
Right.
Sometimes because look, our best source of publicity is the fact that the people that work for the organization, or at least most of them, and the kids that come here, they go out in the community and they
Well,
our publicity.
they become like your ambassadors, right? I mean,
Exactly.
you have people just talking about PYO and Parc-Extension in all corners of the province, basically.
Definitely. We had people that came in from Ontario to see the one of our things for the 50th was a photo gallery, and people came in from Ontario to see this
Wow.
photo montage of the organization, and he was like, "That's me in the picture."
Wow.
And that person's my father, and he couldn't come, so we're scanning the picture for him, and so that he can take it back home and like make it bigger for his father. And I think it's just people grew up there and they're emotionally attached to the organization. I know we work really hard for our staff to become emotionally attached to the organization and just create that milieu de vie where that transcends no matter where you move to Laval, you move to the South Shore, people still come back and say, like, this is where I grew up.
What are some of the challenges that you guys have had in the past years?
Funding. Definitely funding. It always comes down to that, right? So demand for programs are huge. Funding is limited, and we're a whole bunch of organizations fighting for a piece of the pie. And so that's definitely one of the challenges. Also, keeping more and more, especially we're financed by Centraide. So we're asked to, like, an organization has to be run as a business. You have to have very strong human resource policies. You have to have very strong financial standings and things like that. So definitely that's a challenge. Right now, what we're having as a challenge right now today is that, okay, we're nonprofit organizations and we never like investing money in stuff that's very costly. So my computer at work is ancient.
Yeah.
And right now with this pandemic, we're seeing that, well, you can't go engage with the kids face to face anymore. And we're trying to do it and move online and do certain things online, but we're running our organizations off of our phones right now because we don't have the technology to do that, and we're trying to catch up.
Well, at the end of the day, everything comes down to revenue, right? And I remember working with a lot of organizations, and that was one of our biggest puzzle. How do we get organizations to be self-sufficient rather than to be always dependent on getting government grants? Because it's not it's the funds aren't always recurrent.
No.
I mean,
there
are certain programs that might be recurrent, but at the end of the day, the bulk of what you get, maybe you won't get it next year. And for different organizations, when you're so focused every year on getting funds and your mind is set on that aspect of it, obviously you're not focusing on what the mission should be of the organization, right? So, and it's a big struggle for a lot of organizations. But I mean, you guys have managed to, I don't want to say to become self-sufficient, because obviously you're not. Tell me about the revenue generating programs that you guys have.
Basically, that is my responsibility with my assistant director, is to make sure that the financing comes in. So a lot of it is grant writing and what governments offer as different programs, and trying to see how you can, because you try to always go from what the needs of the residents are, and then try to see where I can find a grant or a foundation that would allow me to fund that type of program. So I'd say that's about a good 25 hours a week job. So we're very, very lucky. We've managed to diversify greatly our sources of funding. So if one, because it's not recurrent, stops, well, we have other sources of funding that kick in. And also a big part of getting funds is developing relationships. So we were very lucky. We developed a relationship with Capital One that now has an office in Parc-Ex.
Yeah, in Parc-Ex, yeah.
Exactly. So I know employees that work there and that work, where they give grants, and to really develop a relationship with them. They come down, they come see what we're doing, so they can help pack baskets for food baskets. They help fund kids' Christmas gifts and things like that, and developing those relationships, and so that when they're giving something, they know exactly what they're funding,
Mhm.
and so that they feel that they're really taking part in the organization's mission.
It's interesting that you're mentioning this because we're seeing more and more of a trend where I don't want to say large corporations because we don't have large corporations in Parc-Ex, but
Mm.
even big businesses, they are starting more and more to have this social responsibility aspect to these businesses, and we know that Park Extension is going to change, and it's already changed. Like the last 10 years in Parc-Ex has been
Oh,
one
for sure.
giant transition, where you're going to have much more business settling in. Do you think that there's an opportunity for you there to create and further those links with the business community?
I think so. We do. I think that's where we're becoming successful. Is our relationship with Capital One is very, very solid, but we also developed a very good relationship with Le Restaurant Le Beaumont, which is a subsidiary of Le Toqué restaurant. And while they're not funding us, we've developed partnerships in our kitchen program. We have a kitchen program that trains people to go become cooks
Hmm.
in 8 weeks, and they've hired some of the graduates of our program. They have a chef. They've invited us over. They've had the chef speak to the participants, and so maybe it's not money that necessarily that some businesses can give, but there's other types of relationships.
Yeah.
We've had companies come in and do work. When we built XArts, we had a company that came in, 20 employees, and they're the ones that painted the walls and assembled IKEA furniture and did the landscaping that we had to do. So definitely you have to develop these relationships to
XArt is
stay
still
relevant.
around?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I remember it was created when I was there, or it was at the early stages. That's an interesting program. Share with everyone listening or watching a little bit about XArt because it's such an amazing program.
Okay. So XArt is for youth that are 16 and up that are often not part of the usual pathway of you go to school, you graduate, and you go to work. So often these people have either dropped out or are trying to find their way in school to find. So this is a place where they can come, and there's like 2 or 3 different ways that they can integrate. You can just come and hang out at XArts. So there's pool tables and video games and that kind of stuff. And there's people there. There's our workers are there, and they're like, if you need help writing a CV or you want to talk about something, like we're there. So sometimes some kids just come in to chill, as they
Yeah.
say. However, they also organize a bunch of structured activities, so they can do hip hop dance, but it's always fueled by what the youth want. So they've created they've created a clothing line with recycled material,
Wow.
and then a fashion show and different hip hop and spoken word workshops. So they do that. And we also have a very strong employability program in there. So it's anything from I need to find work, I need my CV to be written, I want to practice interview skills. So things like that. So,
Where do those kids turn up?
what do you mean?
Like, where do they end up after that? I mean, do most of them end up actually finding a job or doing something productive? Uh, like, where do they go from that program? Like, from the beginning, since you guys created it. I mean,
yeah.
what's the outcome? What are the results?
A lot of them do find jobs. Sometimes they're not typical jobs. There's some of them that have gone off and created their own companies and or become dance instructors and things like that. So one of the important things that we do is that showing is like not everybody is going to graduate from university or CEGEP and just go straight to work.
Mm-hmm.
Some people develop their own little companies and haven't finished university and move on and do fantastic things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just showing all the possibilities than just the straight, you go to school, you graduate.
Oh, no, for sure.
Yeah.
And, there's a growing trend, with different organizations. I don't want to say they're questioning the education, but they've understood that perhaps that traditional path isn't a fit for everyone.
It definitely isn't.
And
No.
of course not. We know that. I mean, you see it. It's just that, and kids for decades have been forced to follow a path that they just couldn't adapt to, and they ended up doing nothing. Whereas had you had someone or some organization been there to take the child or the teenager and just push him or her towards something that they enjoy and that they feel comfortable in, that they have a passion for, the doors that can open are tremendous. And now we're seeing more and more the alternative schools that are coming into place now, where they're focusing more on the kids' interest rather than uh, than uh, the traditional education material that has been taught, right? So how many kids usually come in a year through that XR program?
XArts usually has about 50 kids that go through a day.
Wow.
That drop in every day.
They mostly live in Parc-Ex?
Most of them, yeah. There's a few that come from Saint Michel and
That's fine.
Villeray there, but most of them are Parc-Exers.
Is there still a reality in Parc-Ex where there's that whole aspect of the marginalized society? Obviously, there's a lot of poverty. Do you see any change, or is Parc-Extension going to remain like forever that district where people just get their start, and it's tough and it's like an uphill climb, and the kids are underprivileged financially, obviously?
I think that changed drastically already 10 years ago with the University of Montreal that's decided to open a campus. And in the past, Parc-Ex was a place you arrived, you stayed up to 5 years, and you moved on to something else. So 50% of the population would change every 5 years. I think right now, with everything that's going on in the plateau and everything with the university campus, we're seeing an influx of people in Parc-Ex that are not, that are financially well off. And that's starting to change what Parc-Ex looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I worked in summer camp, there was one French name. There was one kid out of all the 300 kids. There was one French name, and his name was René, and he was the only kid that had that type of name. But now you see more and more English-speaking and French-speaking families moved in.
I lived through these transitions. Obviously, I grew up when Parc-Ex was primarily Greek. Mm-hmm. But then, I lived the early to mid 90s when the Greeks started kind of transitioning away, and then you had the South Asians coming in. So I lived that whole transition. And like you said, about maybe 10 years ago, or maybe 5 to 10 years ago, we started noticing that transition happening again, where the South Asian communities were now moving out. But weirdly enough, the new wave of people coming in weren't immigrants, because that's what Parc-Ex was always about. Before the Greeks, there was someone else, and before them, there was someone else. It was always these new waves of immigrants coming in. And the fascinating thing about, sorry, the fascinating thing about, 5, 10 years ago, sorry.
Okay.
My saliva kind of went crooked. Sorry. So the fascinating thing about this new transition 5, 10 years ago is that it wasn't a wave of immigrants. It was, like you said, young professionals, students, young entrepreneurs, young families. And I have a feeling that that's going to stay. I don't know if
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if there's gonna be another transition.
I think right now Parc-Ex is going to become the next trendy place to live in Montreal. So I still think we're gonna have a mix of these newly arrived people that are coming into Parc-Ex, and uh, still some immigrant families, because this is where immigrant families, when they come, this is where their temples are, or their mosques are, and their
Yeah.
churches are. And you can just see that from the Greeks. Why are they so attached to Parc-Ex? Yes, they grew up there, but that's where their churches are and their bakeries
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
So I think Parc-Ex is still going to see an influx of new people. And you can see that in buildings being bought and renovated and becoming condos. But I think we're going to have that mix for a bit, at least still, because of the makeup of Parc-Ex.
Yeah. Let's talk about the reality, because we were talking about, just while we're preparing for this for the podcast, you were telling me that you're very much involved in what's happening now with this whole pandemic. I've been following you guys almost from the very beginning. What a crazy time to be living in.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that this is where we're at. I think when we started hearing about this in
Yeah.
February, you're just
Yeah.
like, whatever. And then I think it was right after we had winter camp that all of a sudden, it was like nonstop. And I remember the day Mr. Legault announced that basically we were going to be shutting down. I was watching the news and I had my phone on, and I had forgotten to take off the Facebook notifications of work on my phone. And this man that's on our Meals on Wheels program basically wrote in and just basically said, "What am I supposed to do now? I can't go out. I'm ill. I don't want to subject myself to going to these stores right now. How am I supposed to feed myself?"
Yeah.
And it was heartbreaking. And I remember we kind of texted back and forth a bit, and I remember telling this man, as long as I am allowed in our building, we will continue offering our Meals on Wheels program.
Right.
And usually in the past, we've only done it 2 days a week, because another organization would do it the 3 other days. And that organization, which is mostly run by older volunteers, they had to shut down. So I was like, well, we're going to do it 7 days a week. So our Meals on Wheels, we will deliver food. You'll have food, a meal every day. And then also what ended up happening is that I have this kitchen. It was stocked full of food because we're offering food to different schools and our community cafeteria, our catering service. And I have a truck that can deliver Meals on Wheels. And there was Ressources Action Alimentation, which is our next door neighbor in our building, that also wanted to start offering food baskets to the residents, because a lot of them were calling in like, I've lost my job. I don't have anything to feed my family. So we basically partnered up. And today we are delivering our 1,000 food basket in Parc-Ex.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we've been at it nonstop since March 15th, I think.
Wow.
Nonstop, yeah. 1,000 food baskets delivered, and we do about between 50 and 60 Meals on Wheels a day.
Right. Have you kept this is what you used to do before?
No, we did Meals on Wheels before, but as I said, 2 days a week.
What was
just
the
to
number?
help.
Were you at 50, 60 meals when you did them, or?
No, definitely not.
Wow.
No, we maybe had 20. It's just everybody needs help right now.
Absolutely. And people reach out?
Definitely. We have social media that helps us to reach out. Also, the fact that the truck goes around and we have our logo on it with our phone number, I think that's gotten some elderly people to call in that aren't necessarily on social media.
Yeah.
Word of mouth plays a big a big spot too in getting the word out, because some of these families aren't technologically connected.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah. There's something good that always comes out of every situation, right? And the wave of solidarity that I've seen in these circumstances is phenomenal. And of course, you're not the only one, providing help uh,
nope.
during this pandemic. But in such a fragile area in Montreal, where people already are economically challenged, whether it's a pandemic or not, I mean, Parc-Ex is still considered, um, you know. Uh, of an underprivileged district across Canada. The fact that there's something like this that exists. When I saw this on Facebook, I was like, God, thank God. I mean, this is such a good piece of news that I heard. And it was amazing the fact that you started working with these other organizations as well. Just combined all your efforts together. And how are the people doing though? See, for me, the problem, because I follow the news almost every single day, and I've even said this in previous podcasts. It, I have an issue with the fact that and I don't want you to get to start commenting politics here, but the
Mm-hmm.
issue that I have is that from almost the very beginning, we knew that Montreal was kind of being secluded, right? I mean, we kind of paused everything happening in the regions because obviously the medical resources aren't as they are in Montreal. But by doing so, you're obviously pinpointing Montreal as a huge case of COVID-19. And from the very beginning, they started hinting at districts like Parc-Extension, Saint Michel, Montreal North, Côte des Neiges as potential hotspots. And it's only until this week that they brought the public testing sites. And
Yeah.
of course, that's it's none of your business. It's not your responsibility what the government does, but it's frustrating because you're seeing this firsthand. I mean, you're there, you're on the ground, you're seeing. I mean, you guys are putting your life at risk going into these houses, or I don't know exactly how you're doing it, but
Mm-hmm.
you're constantly in contact with people that may or may not, but very likely have the virus. I mean, it's one of the biggest hotspots in Montreal, and it's just frustrating that it's taken so little time for help to come from above, while the help from ground up has been there from like minute one.
Yes. I think when you look at the hotspots in Montreal, it's all these districts that are in a certain way disadvantaged.
Yeah.
And I think what this pandemic is doing is bringing to the forefront everything that nonprofit organizations have been saying for many years. We have a lot of families crammed into small apartments that aren't necessarily hygienic.
Yeah.
We have families that we cannot reach because we do not have the language skills, or they're not technologically connected. These people don't necessarily watch Canadian or Quebec news.
Yeah.
So getting the word out in Parc-Ex is important. And then while working, so we're driving around delivering meals, and you see the buses arrive to pick up workers, and they're crammed 60 in a small yellow bus, and you're like, this is going to, like, when it starts, it's going to go.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like a wildfire. And you see, even yesterday I actually volunteered at the testing site, and we're not getting to everybody.
People weren't going.
No, they did a record amount of tests.
Okay.
But are they reaching the right people?
Yeah.
Or are we just reaching the people that like consult the news and hear on social media that the testing sites are going to be there?
Well, what role did the other community leaders have in this? I mean, was there any outreach to them?
We tried so hard. The thing is that we found out maybe Thursday that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
But they only settled on where this testing site was going to be on Friday, and it was on Monday that the testing began.
Yeah.
So by the time you translate, because we were ready to paper the neighborhood, in different languages what was going to go on. But it was decided just so last second
Yeah.
that it was just not possible to get it out. Good news is that we hear that it's going to come back in Parc-Ex, and hopefully they're going to come on a weekend where you can get some workers, because 10 to
Yeah.
4 isn't a realistic
Yeah.
testing time. So,
And the truth is that a lot of the, a lot of the residents living in these districts that are hotspots, they are in most cases doing whatever essential work needs to be done now. They're caregivers, or they work in hospitals. They're cleaners. They're people that are out there. I mean, it's not people that are closed in and they're just waiting for this to pass, right? So
yeah.
these are the people that occupy the jobs that are, considered the dangerous jobs now.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I mean, Parc-Extension is just one district that is crammed with apartment buildings. People within the apartments are crammed. There's like one or two families living together. I don't know. I mean, you're living this much closer than I am. Obviously, I mean, I still have family in Parc-Extension, and they're not moving. But is it quieting down a little bit? I mean, are you seeing any progress, or is it still pretty much like it was from day one?
I think you see you see two realities in Parc-Ex. You see either people that are like, you know what, I have to work and I have to go out there and I have to face this every day. So that's what I'm going to do. And then you see families that are like bunkered in there and will not leave the house. The kids haven't even cracked a window because they're just so afraid.
Mhm.
And then when you're discussing with these families, like, okay, now you have your food basket, so you're set there. What else do you need? And they're like, well, my kids don't have toys.
Mm,
So trying to get them ways to amuse themselves,
yeah,
because there's no way they're going to let them out in the
yeah,
parks.
yeah.
So you have these two realities in Parc-Ex, either like terribly afraid, or people that like, you know what, I just got to get stuff done because I have a family to feed.
What about, and I know that you guys don't really deal with social services, but there are a lot of people in Parc-Extension that suffer from, a variety of health issues, notably, mental illness. There's all these things, and we worked with organizations that dealt with battered women, for
Mm-hmm.
example. Uh, how are we dealing with this right now?
We're doing a lot of phone calls with Ressources Action Alimentation. We call the families, see how they're doing, especially if we see a change in their schedule or how we see them interacting with us. We'll give them a call and we'll try to refer to different services. For the violence towards women or to children, I was actually discussing with um, one of the active police officers yesterday, and she said that there was not a uptake of calls of family violence, and I was a bit surprised.
Yeah,
Um, it'll be interesting to see how things play out once people are coming back out to
yeah,
get services. But like, if you're in a house and
yeah. You're not gonna call.
you're not going to
Yeah,
call, so you're depending on your neighbors to call if they hear something, right? So
yeah. I would question
it's a
that
bit
also.
scary. It's scary.
Um, we're gonna close it up. I know that you're very busy. Tell me, going forward, uh, what are you guys planning? I know that you were saying that this whole reality has changed a lot in the way that you think of the ways that you're gonna, work going forward. But what's in the, what's on the horizon now going forward for PYU?
Um, we're working two different things right now. We're working on how we are going to reopen services. Just like for summer camp, I just got the plan that we need to follow to be able to reopen summer camp on June 22nd. So I have maybe a month to put that in place.
And that's
To give,
happening.
so far,
Okay.
I was told that it is happening. Of course, it can change tomorrow, right? And then they can say
Yeah.
no, summer camp is off, and then it's back on, and then who knows? But I have to start planning now. Summer camp is not going to be like it was before. The ratios are going to change drastically, and you're going to have to keep this distance, and there's not going to be outings and things like that. So it's going to be a whole new reality there. And also, I think we all learned now that we have to start moving certain services to be online also. And that poses a huge obstacle for certain families. And we're going to have to be very creative in reaching the families that don't have internet connection at home and a computer at home, to still be able to offer quality services to them, but through ways that they can participate too. So like one of the programs that we're doing right now is that our art, it's based on art therapy way of working with kids, is that we created these packets of a whole bunch of different ways to get the kids to express how they feel about COVID-19, because they have a lot of questions and they're living these uncertain times. They can't socialize, they can't go see their friends. And that brings up a lot of feelings in them. And often, well, it's hard to get them to speak about this. So we have a bunch of activities that are made. So it's like you have Play-Doh, or you draw, or you paint something. So right now your house is your superhero. So draw us your house as a superhero. And we're going to have our therapists that are going to call the kids and the parents to follow up, to just see, like, is everybody okay? Or if you see something, like a child that's not adjusting well, and be able to refer them to services. And that would be great to do on Zoom, because you can reach a whole bunch of kids really, really fast if they can all connect. But there's still going to be those phone calls to these families one-on-one, because you can't reach everybody on Zoom and Google Meets and things.
Yeah. So. In terms of your, in terms of other services, in terms of funding, I mean, obviously things are going to change now. Are you guys putting a plan in place for the months or the years coming?
Right now, we've been very lucky with funding. Centraide, the city of Montreal, and different levels of government have definitely come in and been able to give money to organizations very, very quickly. But now, as we see this is going to last, at one point, the money's not going to flow in as easily. So it's going to be to relook at your business model, and how am I going to sustain this through a long period of time. As I said, our kitchen service was our way of getting our own money to be able to invest in the groups. So like a cafeteria style place is probably over. Catering is probably put at least a big damper on for the next foreseeable future. And we were working on opening a community salle de réception.
Okay.
So we had just finished our business plan for that, and we were hoping to open that in the fall. Well, that's all going to be on hold right now, and we're going to have to just sit down and figure out how we're going to work out.
Well, look, I think that an organization like yours has adapted to many other things, and they've done well for many, many decades. I don't think that there's an obstacle that you haven't been able to overcome, and it's just that, right? It's just a speed bump, and I'm confident that you and your staff over there are gonna pull through. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know that you're working hard, and you're on the ground every single day. I don't know how you do it, but good on you, and congratulations to the entire team over there. And honestly, I'm not saying this just like that, but I do think of you guys from the first message that I saw that you were doing the deliveries. I was like, God, man, these are the unsung heroes, and they exist everywhere. And I'm glad that you took the time to do this, Jo-An.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, my staff has really been phenomenal. They're the ones knocking on doors. Like, I've done it a few times, but they're really the ones out there and meeting with families and interacting. And I'm really proud of them.
For sure. I hope to see you soon in better circumstances, obviously.
Hopefully very soon.
All right, Jo-An, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.